But so let's talk about a few basic principles of finance. So we're going to talk about our financial foundation. So let me back up just a bit here. I think I told you earlier, or I know I told you earlier, that my background is in architecture. So when we talk about building a financial foundation, I have a lot of experience around building things. So what we want to start off with when we talk about building our financial house, we want to start off with protection. Now, again, this is the stuff that you know. Maybe some of you don't know. Maybe some of you thought you knew, and then there's another group of you who didn't even know that you didn't know this. But this is the critical information you're going to need to begin to put your financial house in order, so that you can not only survive but thrive in situations like this. So what are we talking about from our basic, our foundation? We're talking about protection. Now, when I talk about protection, I'm actually talking about the insurances: life insurance, health insurance, disability, long-term care. Now, I get a lot of strange looks when I start off with this, because people are like, okay, Kelvin, I thought we were going to talk about stocks, bonds, mutual fund, cryptocurrency, real estate. And I'm saying, yes, we can talk about all those things, and we likely will talk about all those things. But here's the problem. Just like you build a house and you invite people over, you don't immediately run downstairs and say, hey, look at my foundation of my house. Isn't it very sturdy? Look how smooth the concrete is. You don't typically say that, but maybe you should start, because if there was a crack, if there was any problem with just one section of the footing for your house or your building, do you know you actually would not be allowed to stay in that house? They would condemn it, because at any point in time, your whole house could come down. So just like finances is not the sexiest part of your financial portfolio, but it's arguably the most important. Why? Because without those things, life, health, disability, what you need to realize is that you are your number one financial asset. If you are not around to provide income for your family, incapacitated where you can't go to work, and those sort of things, then your financial house will come down. People talk to me all the time and say, and I ask them, what do you think your number one financial asset? A lot of times they'll say my house, my 401k, my real estate portfolio, or my stock portfolio. And those are all good answers. Unfortunately, they're wrong. Because if you're not around or you can't work to pay your mortgage, I don't think your house is going to be an asset for you much longer. If you don't go to work, or you no longer have a job, more accurately, to contribute to your 401k, that's not going to be much of an asset for you come time for retirement. So you are your number one financial asset. That's something that we need to know starting from today, moving forward. Okay. Next, we look at debt management. Debt management is important. And again, we're not talking about debt elimination. We're talking about debt management, because sometimes debt can be good when it's managed properly. I like to say, if you have an investment making 8, 9, 10, or 12%, that sounds good. You're doing very well. That's actually, a very good rate of return. But if you have credit cards at 18, 19, and 20%, then you're probably not doing as well as you thought, because the money is going out faster than it's coming in. So you need to manage your debt and make sure you're on the upside of that ledger. Next, we're looking at emergency fund. Now, since this whole COVID thing, I really haven't had to do any deep conversations around people about emergency fund. What is an emergency fund? Industry standard says that you should have 3 to 6 months of your expenses in a fund, separate from your checking, separate from your savings. Sometimes that's debatable how you can do that, but ideally that's the situation, just in case of emergencies. So today, we're every day we're watching the news to see, when are we getting back to work? We don't really know. And that's creating a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety for people. But those folks who have 3 to 6 months, not saying they have no anxiety, but I'm sure their anxiety is much less because by all indications, that's approximately the timeline when we may be getting back on track. You know, other people's have more, and I've talked about that. But if you at least had that, just imagine, for those of you who do, congratulations. For those of you that don't, I think you will see, you would understand how that would greatly minimize your current anxiety because you were in a position where you could wait it out. And then last but not least, investments. At the end of the day, if you can't find a way for your money to make you money, it's going to be very difficult for you to move forward. But again, we want to do it in the right order, because the other side is if you simply focus on investments, and we have a situation like we have now where the market drops 30% and then it comes back and then it drops again, or it drops 40% like it did in 2008. Imagine this structure was turned upside down and everything was pending or contingent on your investments, and there was some volatility in the market like there frequently is. Well, it's much easier for this structure to come topple over if everything was contingent on your investments. But if we do it this way, it's a much more sturdy structure, and you can withstand several hits that if you had yourself structured in a different manner, it's much easier for your house of cards to come falling down. All right, so that's your financial foundation. The other thing we want to look at is kind of a process. There's a process to building wealth, a solid foundation, financial security, whatever you want to call it. And I won't go into a long detail here, but I literally do pretty much almost an entire presentation just on this slide alone. But I want to introduce this again as something that you may not know, or you may not know in this way. So this is basically it's almost, think of it like a work chart or a flow chart for financial success. So when you start, what do you want to start with? Obviously, you want to start with making money. If you're not making any money, then it's pretty much game over already, because we do live in this country. It's a capitalistic society. So if we can't make money, then it's going to be very difficult for us to do anything from a financial perspective. But the other thing I want you to realize is that a lot of us, just because we haven't been given the knowledge, only focus on making money. But what I hope this diagram imparts to you is that that is just the first step. It's not, the game is not over. The game just started when you make money. So a lot of people try to earn more. They want to start a business. They want to get another job. They want to get another raise because they're just focused on making it. But there are other forces working against them, which is why if you just focus on making it, it's going to be very hard for you to succeed. But so what's the next step? The next step is you need to focus on keeping it. Now, we've all heard it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep, but how many of us actually have a strategy to keep more of our money than we ordinarily would? Again, this is where our tax strategies and our expenses and those sort of strategies to minimize those things are put into place. Next, we want to grow our money. So again, it's not enough for us to just make it. By the time we get here, our money needs to be making us money. So this is where our investments, whether it be, the stock market, real estate, or what have you. But this, as opposed to using the term real estate, I'm gonna recant that, because for my real estate folks on the call, I want us to begin to think a little bit differently in terms of this is active and this is passive. So even with real estate, where you're fixing and flipping, you're buying and holding, you're collecting rents, you're evicting people and those sort of things, I would not put that in this category for the purpose of this discussion. I would say this is when your money is making you money, essentially separate and apart from any effort that you provide. That's really what you want to think of. You want your money to be somewhere making you money with little to no input from you. Now that's when you're growing your money. Next, we want to look at protecting our money, because it doesn't do us a lot of good to make it, keep it, grow it if we can't protect it. What does this mean? So this is where some of those insurances come in, whether it's from a business insurance or personal, or you have something like an annuity, which is essentially insurance on your money. We need to protect the money that we've created up to that point, so that we can now move to the last phase, which is transfer that money to the next generation. One of the problems in our community, and probably in others as well, is that every generation has to start pretty much from zero, because some of us can make it, we can keep it, some of us can even grow it, but we seem to have a problem protecting it and having enough to transfer to that next generation, so they can start from where we left off, not start from where we started from. So if you think of this again as a race, Olympic race, like the hurdles, where you need to get over each hurdle in order to be successful. In other words, you need a strategy to get over each hurdle. You need a strategy about how you can make money or make more money, how you're going to keep that money you made, how you're going to grow it, protect it, and transfer it. So if you were to run and hurdles, and let's say you were to trip over the second hurdle, because this is where a lot of us trip up. We make decent money, we just don't know how to hang on to it. IRS or Uncle Sam is our not so silent partner, because they're making 25, 24, 30, 32% of everything we do. So the more money we make, they're our biggest cheerleader, because that's the more money they get. So we need to have a strategy on how to legally keep that. So if you see a race, and we've all seen the race where the person trips over, let's say, the second hurdle, well, more likely than not, they're going to lose that race. But likewise, we've also seen a race where the person gets to that last hurdle and trips. They still lose the race. So we got to have a strategy of getting over all of the hurdles. Okay. Now, let's talk quickly about the wealth formula. This was something else that I will tell you that I actually did not know. And, I'm gonna be honest, I was a little taken aback when I learned about it, and I learned how simple it was. There is a formula to building wealth. There's a mathematical formula to building wealth. Either you know the formula and you apply it, or like most of us and like me, you don't know the formula. Very simple formula. Let me walk you through it. So first, we need to start with some money. Now, it doesn't say we need a lot of money. It just says we need some money. Next, we're dealing with time. We want our money to be somewhere working for us over the period of time. I like to tell my clients, if you want $1 million at the age of 65 and you're 64 years old, you need somewhere close to $999,000, because you don't have a lot of time. But if you want $1 million at 65 and you're 25 or 35 years old, well, you have a lot more time. So that's actually much more doable, because you have time on your side. Okay. And next, we're looking at rate of return. Now, you see there's a plus or a minus there. That's just to let you know sometimes rate of return can work against you. If you don't believe me, look at your credit card statement. But for the purpose of this example, we're going to focus on the positive side of rate of return. Now, let me go back really quickly. A lot of times we'll talk to different advisors, and I'm gonna get on my industry a little bit here, and this is as far as they'll kind of take you. You don't talk about compound interest and how it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, yada yada. And they're not wrong. Compound interest is very important, so important that I'm going to talk to you about on the next slide. The problem is they haven't taught you the wealth formula, because the wealth formula has two more components to it: negative inflation, negative taxes. Why are those two things negative? Well, I shouldn't say actually why. What I should point out is that there are only negatives, there are no positives. So this means at no time, or another way to put it is at all times, is inflation and taxes working against you. So you only got two things working for you, time and rate of return. You got two things working against you. So if you can find your money at some location where it can work for a period of time and it can get a rate of return such that it can offset it, tax and inflation, then and only then are you building wealth. So really quickly, because I want to cover a lot of ground here, but I'm just going to tell you, let's put some numbers to this. Inflation for the last 10 to 12 years has been around 3%. Most people are in a 15 to 24%, or 14 to 24% tax bracket with the new Trump tax code. So let's just round these two up and say 5%. So what this is really telling us is that if your money is at somewhere where you're not at least making 5%, you are not building wealth. And another way to say you're not building wealth is that you're losing money. So now you guys can put this in the chat as I move, but I'm just interested to see if anybody, you can just say yes or no. If anybody out there who has a checking account or a savings account, tell me if that checking, or if you're getting a whole 5% in your checking or savings account. Because if you are, congratulations. You're one of the few people who I know who are, and I want you to immediately send me the information of your bank. If you are not, you, like many of us, are actually losing money in our checking, in our savings accounts. Now, I have nothing against bank. The bank never promised to make us wealthy. They just said your money will be here when you get back. But what we know is with inflation and taxes working against us, the buying power of our money is greatly diminished. So go ahead and pop into the chat if you, yes or no, if you're making 5% or more. Now, not 0.5, a whole 5%. National average for savings account is 0.025. So if you're making more than 5%, like I said, we need to have a conversation immediately after this Zoom call. Okay. All right. Now on the rule of 72, this is where we talk about compound interest. So let's talk about the rule of 72. The rule of 72 was developed by this gentleman named Albert Einstein. So again, we're talking about things we don't know, or we may know and didn't know to the extent we didn't know. It was developed by a gentleman named Albert Einstein, and he came up with a formula and basically figured out a way for us to determine how hard our money is or is not working for us, and he called it the rule of 72. So basically what Albert Einstein figured out is if you take the number 72 and you divide it by your interest rate, so wherever you're getting this interest, it can be a CD, it can be a CD, it can be a mutual fund, a money market, an investment, doesn't matter what rate of return am I getting, we're able to figure this out in terms of what kind of rate of return we have. So when we say, what Albert Einstein figured out is if you take the number 72 and you divide it by your interest rate, it's going to give you a number. And that number is the number of years it's going to take your money to double. So if I were to give everybody on this Zoom call $10,000 and we were able to deposit that in a bank and get a whole 1%, and I were to ask you, how long do you think it will take for your $10,000? If you didn't touch it, you didn't move it, you didn't make any withdrawals, you didn't make any deposits, how long do you think it would take just based off of compound interest for your $10,000 to become $20,000? Now we could all get out a calculator and start doing some quick math, or we could just use rule of 72. And what we would say is 72 divided by 1 equals 72. So what that means is it would take you 72 years for your $10,000 to become $20,000 just based on compound interest, just based on compound interest if you didn't touch the money. Now, I think we all realize there's a significant problem with that. First thing we probably know, if you were listening to me earlier, is one, we're not even getting 1%. So if you really want to give yourself a heart attack, look at your actual rate of return in the bank and use the rule of 72 with that and tell me how long it's going to take your money to double. But even if we were making 1%, I don't know the age of anyone on this call, but I'm willing to guess that 72 years is too long for your money to double. So with that assumption, I'm going to move forward and say that's probably not what we want. What if we were able to get a better rate of return in that maybe 4%? So at 4%, now our money is doubling every 18 years. 18 years is still a long time, but it's a heck of a lot better than 72. So now we just picked the age here. This is just an example. So I know some of you are not 29. I'm not either. But the formula, the concept, the knowledge is still the same. It applies to 29, 39, 49, 59. It doesn't matter. If you have your money somewhere at 4%, it's doubling every 18 years. So if we had a 29-year-old who had $10,000, in 18 years they would have $20,000, in another 18 years they have 40. Now, not saying that they could retire, but just saying that they were on the right track. Their money made them money. Their $10,000 made them an additional $30,000. They didn't have to, go work a second job. They didn't have to drive Uber at night. Their money made them money. But I'm sure we all agree that's probably not going to be enough money, certainly not to retire. So let's say if we could find 8%. Now our money is doubling every 9 years. Same person, same age, same amount of money over the same period of time, but this person has $160,000. Now that's a little bit better. So the same person, their $10,000 made them $150,000 during the same time where this person's money made them 30, simply because they knew the rule of 72 and they're like, hey, I need a larger rate of return. Now, even though this number 8 is twice the amount as 4, but this is more than twice as much. This is 4 times as much because we're talking about compounding. Our money is doubling every 80. So let's move forward. Let's say we just get another 2%. Now, a lot of times, normally you look at, 8%, 9%, 10%. It's not that big of a difference. Well, you tell me. Same person, same age, same amount of money, same period of time. But this person now has $320,000. Seems like a big deal to me, that extra 2%. But we hadn't perceived it that way. We all know that 10% is better than 8% and 8% is better than 4. But what we weren't really equipped with is the knowledge of how to calculate how much better. How do we quantify that? And with the rule of 72, now we can do that. So that $10,000 over that same period of time made this person $310,000. So rule of 72 in essence is a quick way for us to understand whether our money is or is not working hard enough for us. Now, most of us, we're not even at 4%. We're not at 1%. We're at some fraction of 1%, which is why we find ourselves in the financial situation we are. Again, the problem isn't that we're not working hard. Like I said before, that's not the problem. The problem is our money is not working hard for us. That's the actual problem. Okay. All right. Moving right along. Let's look at, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly. So when we talk about keeping our money, we need to there's also some things we need to know. What we need to know is from a tax perspective, there are only 3 categories where our money can be. You'll hear the terms taxable, tax deferred, tax advantage. Layman's terms, tax now, tax later, tax never. So what does that mean? Tax now, things we get from our bank, which means every year, if we make any money, whether it's versus interest or capital gains or things of that nature, we're going to be taxed every year. Tax later, generally things we get from our employers or some things we can get on our own, whether we be just an individual IRA or a SEP IRA, which is for small businesses. So this is something we're not going to be taxed now. Our money is going to grow non-tax, but we're going to have to pay the taxes later. Or so tax now, tax later. And then we have tax advantage, also known as tax never. Now, the reason we don't use the term tax never, because in the financial services industry, we have a lot of compliance rules and certain things we can't state. So that's why you have the term tax advantage. But there's another reason why, because a lot of these products within the tax advantage category, if you don't follow the rules, they can become tax now or tax later. But the rules are actually pretty simple. Roth IRA, can't touch the money before 59 and a half. And then after that, you pay no taxes. 529 college savings plan, you can only use the money for education. So if you use it for anything else, it's not only is it taxed, but it's penalized. Municipal bonds, decent return. I mean, well, it's a tax never or tax advantage product, but the interest rates are pretty low. Health savings account, simply they're similar to Roth IRAs. The limits are a little bit lower, but you have until 65. Well, essentially what you need to do is use those for medical expenses, things like co-pays and things like that. But once you turn 65, whatever money's in there, you can use for whatever you want. And then it is tax-free. This should say cash value life insurance, and then you have long-term care benefit. So again, from a tax perspective, we're looking at we need to keep our money. We need to leverage these different categories. So very quickly, let's go back to the gentleman or gentlewoman who was able to accumulate $320,000 in the last slide. If they did it in a tax now product, they would never get 320 because every year their money would make them 10%, but they would lose anywhere from 30 to 40% because of taxes. So they would never amass 320. Tax later, if this was like in a 401k or something like that, in your statement, day one of retirement, you would see $320,000. But what you would need to know, 20 to 30% of that money is not yours. So even though you see 320, only expect to pocket somewhere between 260 to 280 because it is taxed later, meaning when you retire or at that point in time when you turn 65, now that money is taxable. But if you're able to amass 320 in one of these categories, then all 320 is yours. So I hope you see the correlation between not only what your money is doing, but where your money is doing it. That is also very important. Now, as we start we're going to close out this side of it as I come up on 5 o'clock. We want to talk about another aspect of our money. So if rule of 72 is what our money is doing, tax now, tax later is where my money is doing it. When we look at the risk class, we want to know how is my money, how am I getting that 4%? How is that being achieved? How am I getting that 10%? Well, so you have a few other options that you can look at. First of all, you have fixed. The fixed category is, again, things that you get from your bank primarily. But the interest rate is pretty low, somewhere between 0 and 4%. And here are some of the products that fall in that. So with their fixed, between 0 and 4%. So what we know, we're not even outpacing tax and inflation, but we have safety. We know the market goes up, the market goes down. We don't have to worry about that. We're not going to lose any money, but it's probably not going to grow that much either. On this side, we have variable. Variable is essentially your money in the market or in the indice. It can go up and go down. It can go up and go down. A lot of times I like to joke with my clients and says it causes people to pray a lot. I stopped using that joke recently because it's not all that funny right now, because people are literally praying that the market comes back. because they just saw 30 to almost 35% of their money disappear like a bad magic trick. So your money can go up, you can go down. You're in the stock market, 401k, 403b, mutual fund, those sort of things. So you have growth potential, but not that much safety, as we can attest to. But there's something else that, again, we may know about. Maybe we didn't know, or maybe we thought we knew about it, but didn't really know as much as we thought we did. And that's called index. Now, by virtue of the diagram, you probably figured out index is kind of a little bit of best of both worlds, where you can have your growth and you have your safety. It's a signed contract with the financial institution where you can kind of, have your cake and eat it too, in essence. So you'll see these numbers. I'll explain to you the index concept very quickly, because it's based on the concept of a floor in the ceiling. So in this example, our floor is 0.75 and our ceiling is 15%. Our floor is 0.75 and our ceiling is 15%. So what does that mean? So that means you have your money in the index product, the market goes up 5%. Congratulations, you just got 5% credited to your account. Market goes up 10%, you get another 10%. Market goes up 15%. Oh, wow, you're doing great. You got 15%. Market goes up 20%. Congratulations, you get 15%, because that's your ceiling. You cannot go above your ceiling. But if the reverse happens, if the market goes down 5, 10, 15, 30% like it did last month, not only do you not go down, you go up 0.75. So this is really the real life example of Warren Buffett's 2 rules of money. I'm not sure if you guys have heard Warren Buffett's 2 rules of money. Anyone who's heard me do my lectures, you probably heard it. But for the benefit of those who have not, I'll tell you again, because it's something you could definitely remember. So Warren Buffett, and you can Google it if you like, he's literally said these words. Rule number 1, never lose money. That's his first rule of money. Rule number 2, do not forget rule number 1. So what Warren Buffett is really saying to us in a very tongue-in-cheek way, it's sometimes, or most times, if you look at it over the long haul, it's more important not to lose money than it is to make. Because if you never lose and you always are going up, you're always going to be on the positive side of that ledger. Does that make sense? So this is the risk class part of it. Now, really quickly, I'm going to show you this diagram, and I'm going to get into what we, dealing with the new COVID economy. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I want to show you this just because I'm a visual person. And when I first heard about index, it sounded very good. I kind of understood the concept, but when I saw this, it made all the difference in the world. So first of all, let me back up here a bit. And this just shows you an example of what the S&P 500 did between 1999 to 2012. Essentially identifying all those recessions that I showed you earlier are represented here. 2001 dot-com bubble, dot-com bubble, 2001, 9/11, we had record returns, and then 2008, bank bailout, mortgage-backed security, Obama gets elected, market jump immediately goes up. It took a little dip, and then it was going up ever from that point until I think it was second quarter of last year. And then, of course, we know what happened first quarter of this year. We had the COVID crisis. So if you had your money in the market like a 401k, 403b, TSP stock, you're kind of taking the roller coaster ride. But if you had your money in an index, it would look something like this. So as the market is going down, you're going up based on your floor, 0.75. Market goes down again, you're going up 0.75. Market goes down again, you're going up 0.75. So you run into your friend at the water cooler and they're not very happy because they've almost lost half of their money. you're not ecstatic because you haven't made a lot, but at least you haven't lost. So they're much more upset than you are. But now the market comes back, you start to go up, but it's just to your cap. Now in this particular side, the cap is shown at 13.5. So you would just know in today's index, you could get more than this, but this is just being very conservative. Market goes up 9.6, that's under your cap, so you get all 9. Market goes up 9.6 again, so that's under your cap. So basically, you see how this is going, because even now, or when you get to 2008, where it appears that, hey, your buddy might actually catch you, when that other market downturn comes, you simply kind of level off, and then you continue to move up. So from a knowledge perspective, understanding, do I have options to have my money always be at risk, or an option of it being ultra safe but not get any growth? The answer to that is yes, you do. And one of those options, not the only one, is index. All right. So we're gonna close it off there. Again, feel free to put any questions you might have in the Q&A, not in the chat, and we will address those questions.